Maria Rodriguez woke up early on Saturday morning. The sun was just coming up over the quiet neighborhood of Willowbrook Heights. She stretched her arms and smiled. This was her favorite time of the week. No phone calls from the office. No urgent cases to solve. Just peace and quiet in her own home. Maria was not like most people in her neighborhood. She had worked very hard to get where she was today. 15 years ago, she started as a regular police officer on the streets. She worked night shifts and dealt with dangerous criminals. She studied hard and took every test she could. Slowly, she moved up in her job. Now Maria was the national sheriff for multi-state task force operations. This was a very important job. She worked with police from different states to catch bad people who committed crimes across state lines. She dealt with drug dealers, human traffickers, and organized crime groups. Her job was dangerous and stressful. That is why she loved her quiet weekends so much. Maria bought her house in Willowbrook Heights 2 years ago after getting her big promotion. The neighborhood was nice and safe. The houses were well kept and the streets were clean. Most of her neighbors were doctors, lawyers, and business owners. They drove expensive cars and had perfect lawns. At first, Maria worried that she might not fit in. She grew up in a poor neighborhood where her mother worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. Her father left when she was young. Maria had to fight for everything she got in life. But she earned good money now and could afford to live anywhere she wanted. The house was perfect for Maria. It was a 2-story home with a big backyard. She loved working in her garden on weekends. Growing flowers and vegetables helped her relax after dealing with criminals all week. The garden reminded her of her grandmother, who taught her how to plant seeds when she was little. Maria got dressed in old jeans and a t-shirt. She put on her gardening gloves and went outside. The morning air was fresh and cool. She could hear birds singing in the trees. This was so different from her office, where she spent most of her time looking at crime reports and talking to other law enforcement officers. She walked to her flower bed and started pulling weeds. The roses were blooming beautifully. She had planted them herself last spring. Taking care of plants was very different from catching criminals. Plants needed patience and gentle care. Criminals needed to be stopped with strength and smart thinking. As Maria worked in her garden, she thought about her week. She had just finished a big case involving a drug ring that operated in 5 different states. It took 6 months to catch all the criminals. The case required her to work with FBI agents, local police, and border patrol officers. Coordinating with so many different people was hard work. Maria was proud of her job, but it was not easy being one of the few women in her position. She was also one of the few Hispanic women to reach such a high rank. Some people questioned whether she deserved her job. They thought she got it because of her race or gender, not because she was good at her work. But Maria knew the truth. She earned every promotion through hard work and smart police work. She solved cases that other officers could not solve. She was brave when facing dangerous criminals. She studied for years to learn about federal law and crime investigation. Her record spoke for itself. Her neighbors did not know what she did for work. Maria liked to keep her personal and professional life separate. When she was home, she wanted to be just a regular person who liked gardening and quiet evenings. She did not want people to treat her differently because of her job. Most of her neighbors were friendly but distant. They would wave when they saw her but did not try to start long conversations. Maria was fine with this. She had friends from work and did not need to be best friends with everyone on her street. The neighborhood had a homeowners association, or HOA. This group made rules about how the houses should look. They said what colors people could paint their homes and how tall the grass could be. Maria thought some of the rules were silly, but she followed them. She wanted to live peacefully with her neighbors. Maria had heard that some people in the neighborhood complained about new residents who were different from the original families. She hoped this would not be a problem for her. She kept her house neat and followed all the rules. Her lawn was always cut and her flowers looked beautiful. As she worked in her garden, Maria felt truly relaxed for the first time all week. The stress of her job seemed to melt away. She forgot about dangerous criminals and complicated investigations. Here in her garden, surrounded by flowers and sunshine, she could just be herself. Maria had worked hard to build a good life. She owned a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood. She had an important job that helped keep people safe. She made enough money to take care of herself and help her mother, who still lived in their old neighborhood. But Maria never forgot where she came from. She remembered what it felt like to be poor and scared. She remembered how hard it was to be taken seriously as a young Hispanic woman trying to become a police officer. Those memories made her work harder and treat people with respect, no matter who they were. The sun was getting higher and the day was warming up. Maria looked at her watch. It was almost 10 in the morning. She had been working in her garden for 2 hours. Her back was getting sore, but she felt good. The physical work helped clear her mind. She stood up and stretched. Her flower bed looked much better now. The weeds were gone and the flowers had room to grow. She picked up her gardening tools and started walking back to the house. She planned to take a shower and then maybe read a book on her back porch. Maria did not know that this peaceful Saturday morning would soon be interrupted. She had no idea that some people in her neighborhood had been watching her and talking about her. She did not know that trouble was heading her way. As she walked toward her front door, Maria felt grateful for her quiet life. She had worked so hard to get here. She deserved this peace and happiness. Little did she know that her past experience dealing with criminals would soon come in very handy, right in her own neighborhood. Maria was putting away her gardening tools when she heard voices coming from her front yard. She looked through her kitchen window and saw 3 men standing near her mailbox. They were looking at her house and pointing at different things. One of them was writing something on a clipboard. She did not recognize any of the men. They were all white and looked to be in their 40s or 50s. One man was tall and thin with gray hair. Another was shorter and heavy with a red face. The third man wore glasses and kept looking at papers in his hand. Maria felt her police instincts kick in. Something about these men did not seem right. They were on her property without permission. They looked official, but she had not called anyone to come to her house. She decided to go outside and find out what they wanted. Maria walked to her front door and stepped outside. The 3 men saw her and started walking toward her. The tall man with gray hair seemed to be their leader. He had a serious look on his face and walked with confidence like he owned the place. "Excuse me," Maria called out as she walked down her front steps. "Can I help you with something?" The tall man stopped walking and looked her up and down. His eyes moved from her old gardening clothes to her dirty hands. He did not look friendly. "Are you the person living in this house?" he asked in a cold voice. "Yes, I am," Maria replied. "This is my home. Who are you, and what are you doing on my property?" The tall man pulled out a badge from his jacket pocket. "I am Harold Pemberton, HOA enforcement officer," he said. "These are my associates, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Williams. We are here to conduct an official inspection of your property." Maria looked at the badge he was holding. Something about it did not look right. She had seen many real badges in her 15 years of police work. This one looked cheap and homemade. The lettering was not straight and the metal looked like plastic. "I was not told about any inspection," Maria said calmly. "Can you show me the paperwork that gives you the right to inspect my property?" Harold's face got red. "We do not need paperwork," he said loudly. "The HOA has the right to inspect any property in this neighborhood at any time. We have received complaints about this house and we need to investigate." Maria knew this was not true. She had read her HOA agreement when she bought the house. The HOA could only inspect property if they gave notice first and had a good reason. They could not just show up and demand to search someone's home. "What kind of complaints?" Maria asked. "My house follows all the HOA rules. My lawn is cut, my house is painted the right color, and my flowers are well maintained." The heavy man named Johnson stepped forward. "We have reports of suspicious activity," he said. "People coming and going at strange hours. Loud noises. Possible illegal activities." Maria almost laughed. The only people who came to her house were her mother and a few friends from work. She lived quietly and never bothered anyone. She went to bed early and woke up early. She was probably the most boring neighbor on the street. "That is not true," Maria said. "I live alone and I keep to myself. I work during the week and stay home on weekends." "Who made these complaints?" Harold looked uncomfortable. "We cannot reveal our sources," he said, "but we have reliable information that requires investigation. Now we need to inspect your house and garage immediately." Maria felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice calm and professional. Years of police training had taught her to stay cool under pressure. "I am not letting you into my house without proper legal authority," she said. "If you want to inspect my property, you need to follow the proper procedures." The third man, Williams, had been quiet up until now. He stepped closer to Maria and tried to look threatening. "Lady, you need to cooperate with us," he said. We are trying to help you here. If you fight us, this will get much worse for you." Maria recognized the intimidation tactic. She had seen criminals try the same thing many times. First they acted official, then they got threatening when people did not do what they wanted. These men were bullies who thought they could scare her into giving up her rights. "I am cooperating by talking to you," Maria said firmly. "But I know my rights as a homeowner. You cannot force your way onto my property without legal cause and proper documentation." Harold was getting more angry. "Look here," he said, pointing his finger at Maria. "This is a respectable neighborhood. We have standards here. People like you need to understand that you cannot just move in and do whatever you want." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "People like me?" she repeated. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Harold realized he had said too much. His face got even redder. "I mean people who do not respect neighborhood rules," he said quickly. "People who cause trouble and bring down property values." But Maria heard what he really meant. She had dealt with racism her whole life. She knew the coded language that people used when they did not want to say what they really thought. These men did not want her living in their neighborhood because she was Hispanic. "I have followed every rule," Maria said. "My house is well maintained and I have never caused any trouble. I pay my HOA fees on time, and I participate in community activities. There is no legitimate reason for you to be here." Johnson pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of Maria's house. "We will document everything," he said. "The condition of the property, the violations we observe, and your lack of cooperation." "What violations?" Maria asked. "Point out one thing that is wrong with my property." The three men looked around her yard. Her grass was perfectly cut. Her flowers were beautiful and well organized. Her house was freshly painted. Her driveway was clean and her car was parked properly. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her property. Harold seemed frustrated that he could not find anything to complain about. "There are technical violations," he said vaguely, "things that require professional inspection to identify. That is why we need to look inside your house and garage." Maria knew they were fishing for problems that did not exist. They probably hoped to find something, anything they could use to cause trouble for her. Maybe they thought she had too many people living in her house, or that she was running some kind of business from home. They were looking for an excuse to harass her. "You are not inspecting my house," Maria said clearly. "If you think there are violations, you can file a complaint with the proper authorities through the correct legal channels. But you're not coming into my home." William stepped even closer to Maria. "You are making a big mistake," he said in a threatening voice. "We are giving you a chance to handle this quietly. If you do not cooperate, we will have to call in the real authorities." Maria almost smiled. If only they knew who they were talking to. She was the real authority in this situation. But she was not ready to reveal that yet. She wanted to see how far these men would go with their fake official act. "Call whoever you want," Maria said calmly. "I have nothing to hide." Harold Pemberton was not happy that Maria refused to let them into her house. His face was getting redder and his voice was getting louder. He looked at his two friends and then back at Maria with angry eyes. "You are making a very big mistake," Harold said, stepping closer to Maria. "This neighborhood has rules and standards. People who live here need to follow those rules or they will be removed." Maria stood her ground. She had faced much more dangerous people than these three bullies. Drug dealers with guns were scarier than angry men with fake badges. But she stayed alert and ready for anything. "Removed by who?" Maria asked calmly. "You are not police officers. You have no legal authority to remove anyone from their own property." Harold pulled out his phone and started making a call. "We will see about that," he said. While he was dialing, he spoke loudly enough for Maria to hear. "Yes, this is Harold Pemberton with HOA enforcement. We have a situation at 1247 Maple Street. We need backup for a non-compliant resident." Maria listened to the phone call and knew it was fake. Harold was talking, but she could tell no one was answering on the other end. He was pretending to call for help to try to scare her. This was a common trick that criminals use to intimidate their victims. Johnson started walking around Maria's property, taking more pictures. He took photos of her house, her car, her mailbox, and even her garden. "We are documenting everything for our report," he said. "The authorities will want to see proof of the violations." "What authorities?" Maria asked. "And what violations?" "You have not pointed out a single thing that is wrong with my property." Williams walked over to Maria's car and started looking inside the windows. He tried to open the doors, but they were locked. Then he wrote down her license plate number on his clipboard. "Hey," Maria called out. "Get away from my car. You have no right to touch my personal property." Williams ignored her and kept looking at her car. "Nice vehicle," he said with a mean smile. "I wonder how someone like you can afford a car like this. Maybe we need to report this to the tax authorities." Maria felt her anger rising. These men were not just harassing her about her house. Now they were questioning how she could afford her car and her home. They clearly believed that a Hispanic woman could not legally afford to live in their neighborhood. "My finances are none of your business," Maria said firmly. "I work hard for my money and I pay my taxes. You have no right to question how I afford my property." Harold finished his fake phone call and put his phone away. "The authorities are on their way," he announced. "When they get here, you will have to explain why you are being so uncooperative with official neighborhood inspectors." Maria wanted to laugh. She knew that no real authorities were coming, because Harold had not actually called anyone. But she was curious to see how far these men would take their act. Johnson walked back over to the group. He had taken dozens of pictures and was looking very official with his clipboard. "I have documented several violations," he said seriously. "The grass height is irregular in some areas. The flower bed extends beyond the approved boundaries, and the house numbers are not the standard size required by HOA regulations." Maria looked at her grass, which was perfectly even. She looked at her flower bed, which was exactly where it had been when she bought the house. She looked at her house numbers, which were the same size as every other house on the street. Everything Johnson said was completely false. "Those are all lies," Maria said. "My property is in perfect condition and follows every rule. You are making up violations that do not exist." Harold stepped even closer to Maria. Now he was standing only a few feet away from her. "Are you calling us liars?" he asked in a threatening voice. "We are official HOA representatives doing our job. Your attitude is very hostile and suspicious." Maria recognized this as another intimidation tactic. The men were trying to make her feel like she was the one causing problems. They wanted her to feel guilty and apologize so they could take control of the situation. "I am not being hostile," Maria said calmly. "I am protecting my rights as a homeowner. You have shown me no legal authority to be on my property or to demand access to my house." Williams walked over and stood next to Harold. Now Maria had two men standing very close to her, while the third one continued to take pictures. They were trying to make her feel surrounded and trapped. "We do not need to show you anything," Williams said. "The HOA agreement you signed when you bought this house gives us full authority to inspect and investigate any property in this neighborhood." Maria knew this was false. She had read her HOA agreement carefully with her lawyer before signing it. The HOA had some rights, but they could not just show up and demand to search her house without notice and without cause. "That is not what my agreement says," Maria replied. "If you want to quote the HOA rules, please show me exactly which section gives you the authority to conduct surprise inspections." Harold looked frustrated. "We do not have to explain our authority to you," he said. "You need to trust that we know what we are doing and cooperate with our investigation." Johnson finished taking pictures and walked back to the group. "I think we have enough evidence," he said to Harold. "This property is clearly in violation of multiple HOA standards. The resident is also being uncooperative and hostile toward official representatives." Maria could not believe what she was hearing. These men were creating false violations and then claiming she was the problem for not accepting their lies. They were building a fake case against her step by step. "Evidence of what?" Maria demanded. "You have not shown me a single real violation. You are taking pictures of a perfectly maintained property and claiming there are problems that do not exist." Harold pulled out his phone again and pretended to make another call. "Yes, this is Pemberton again. The situation is escalating. The resident is becoming increasingly hostile and uncooperative. We may need additional support." Again, Maria could tell that no one was on the other end of the phone call. Harold was just putting on a show to try to scare her, but his act was getting more dramatic and more threatening. When Harold hung up the phone, he looked at Maria with a serious expression. "The authorities are very concerned about this situation," he said. "They are sending additional personnel to help resolve this matter." Williams nodded and looked at his watch. "They should be here within the next few minutes," he said. "When they arrive, you will need to cooperate fully or face serious consequences." Maria realized that these men might bring more people to help intimidate her. They might have friends or family members who would pretend to be officials. She needed to be ready for the situation to get worse before it got better. But Maria was not scared. She had dealt with much more dangerous situations in her career. She had faced armed criminals and hostile crowds. 3 middle-aged men with fake badges and clipboards were not going to intimidate her. She also knew that their behavior was illegal. They were impersonating officials, harassing a homeowner, and trying to gain illegal access to private property. If they were smart, they would leave now before they got into real trouble. But Maria could see that these men were not smart. They were bullies who had probably gotten away with intimidating other people in the past. They thought they could scare her into giving up her rights and letting them do whatever they wanted. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Harold Pemberton looked at his watch and then at his 2 friends. They seemed to have a plan that they had discussed before coming to Maria's house. Harold reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another badge. This one looked different from the first one he had shown her. "Since you want to see official authority," Harold said with a mean smile, "here is my special enforcement badge. This was issued by the county and gives me the power to make arrests for HOA violations." Maria looked at the second badge Harold was showing her. It looked even more fake than the first one. The words county enforcement were printed in letters that looked like they came from a home computer printer. The badge was clearly made of plastic painted to look like metal. "That is not a real badge," Maria said calmly. "Real county badges have security features and official seals. That looks like something you made on your computer." Harold's face got red again. "How dare you question my authority?" he shouted. "I am a sworn enforcement officer with the power to arrest people who break neighborhood laws." Maria had to hold back a laugh. There was no such thing as neighborhood laws that could get someone arrested. HOA rules were civil matters, not criminal ones. Even if someone broke every HOA rule, the worst that could happen was a fine or a lawsuit. No one could be arrested for having grass that was too long or flowers in the wrong place. Johnson stepped forward and pulled out a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "We have the authority to detain you until the real police arrive," he said. "You are trespassing on HOA property and failing to comply with official orders." Maria stared at the handcuffs in disbelief. These men were getting more dangerous by the minute. First, they had pretended to be HOA inspectors. Then they had pretended to call for backup. Now they were threatening to arrest her on her own property with fake badges and real handcuffs. "I am not trespassing," Maria said firmly. "This is my house and my property. I have the deed and mortgage papers to prove it. You are the ones who are trespassing by being on my property without permission." Williams walked closer to Maria's front door. "We have reports that you do not actually own this house," he said. "Someone like you probably rents from the real owner who lives somewhere else. The real owner probably does not know what kind of tenant is living in their property." Maria felt her blood boiling. These men were not just questioning her right to live in the neighborhood. They were claiming she was lying about owning her own house. They could not believe that a Hispanic woman could legitimately buy and own a home in their precious neighborhood. "I own this house," Maria said through gritted teeth. "I have owned it for 2 years. I paid for it with money I earned through 15 years of hard work. Your racist assumptions do not change the facts." Harold waved his fake badge in Maria's face. "Racist?" he said loudly. "We do not care what color you are. We care about people who follow the rules and respect the community. You are being hostile and uncooperative, which proves you do not belong here." Maria recognized this tactic too. When bullies got caught being racist, they always claimed they were not racist. They said they only cared about following rules or respecting the community. But their real feelings always showed through in their words and actions. Johnson took a step closer with his handcuffs ready. "We are going to have to detain you now," he said. "You are under citizen's arrest for multiple violations of community standards and failure to cooperate with authorized officials." Maria knew that citizen's arrest was a real thing, but it could only be used in very specific situations. Someone could only make a citizen's arrest if they witnessed a serious crime being committed. HOA violations were not crimes, and even if they were, these men had not witnessed Maria doing anything wrong. "You cannot arrest me," Maria said clearly. "I have committed no crimes. HOA violations are civil matters, not criminal ones. You have no legal authority to detain me or anyone else." Williams pulled out his phone and started recording video. "We are documenting this arrest for legal purposes," he said. "The subject is resisting lawful detention by authorized community enforcement officers." Maria realized the men were creating fake evidence to support their story. They would probably edit the video to make it look like she was violent or dangerous. They might use it to file false police reports or to justify their actions to other people in the neighborhood. "Stop recording me without my permission," Maria demanded. "You are on my private property and I do not consent to being filmed." Harold laughed. "We can record anything we want," he said. "This is official business and you have no expectation of privacy when you are breaking the law." Maria knew that was not true either. People had privacy rights on their own property. But she realized these men did not care about the law. They were making up rules as they went along to justify whatever they wanted to do. Johnson moved even closer with the handcuffs. "Put your hands behind your back," he ordered. "You are being arrested for criminal trespass, failure to comply with lawful orders, and resisting authority." Maria stepped backward toward her front door. She was not going to let these men put handcuffs on her, but she also did not want to get into a physical fight if she could avoid it. She needed to de-escalate the situation before someone got hurt. "I am not resisting anything," Maria said calmly. "I am standing on my own property, exercising my legal rights. You are the ones who are breaking the law by trespassing and making false claims about your authority." Harold held up his fake badge again. "This badge gives me the authority to arrest anyone who violates community standards," he said. "You have violated multiple standards and refused to cooperate with our investigation. That is enough to justify arrest." Maria had heard enough. These men were clearly dangerous and completely out of touch with reality. They actually believed they had the authority to arrest people for made-up violations. They were either completely crazy or they had done this to other people before and gotten away with it. "Let me see that badge up close," Maria said, reaching out her hand. "If it is real, I will be able to verify its authenticity." Harold hesitated for a moment, then held the badge closer to Maria. She looked at it carefully and saw exactly what she expected. The badge was obviously fake. The plastic was cheap and the printing was blurry. There was no official seal or security features. It looked like something a child might use to play cops and robbers. But more importantly, Maria now knew for certain that these men were impersonating law enforcement officers. That was a serious federal crime that carried heavy penalties. They were also attempting to unlawfully detain her, which was kidnapping. And they were doing it on the basis of racial discrimination, which made it a hate crime. "That badge is completely fake," Maria said. "You are impersonating law enforcement officers, which is a federal crime. You are also attempting to kidnap me on my own property. I suggest you leave immediately before you get into more trouble than you can handle." Johnson laughed and moved closer with the handcuffs. "The only one in trouble here is you," he said. "When the real police get here, they will see that we were just trying to do our job and you were the one causing problems." Williams kept recording with his phone. "This is all going on record," he said. "Everyone will see how hostile and uncooperative you have been." Maria realized that these men were not going to leave voluntarily. They were committed to their fake authority act, and they intended to follow through with their threats. She was going to have to reveal who she really was and take control of the situation before it got any worse. But first, she wanted to see exactly how far they would go. She was building a case against them in her mind, documenting every illegal thing they were doing. When this was over, she was going to make sure they faced serious consequences for their actions. Just as Harold was waving his fake badge and Johnson was moving closer with handcuffs, Maria heard the sound of car doors slamming in her driveway. She looked over and saw two more men getting out of a white SUV. The vehicle had large stickers on the sides that read, "Cho Patrol" in bold black letters. The two new men walked quickly toward the group. They both looked similar to the first three, middle-aged white men who seemed to think they were very important. One was tall and thin with a mustache. The other was shorter and stockier with gray hair and glasses. "What is the situation here?" asked the tall man with the mustache as he approached. He was carrying a clipboard and had what looked like a radio clipped to his belt. Harold turned to the new arrivals with a look of relief. "Thank goodness you are here," he said. "This resident has been extremely uncooperative. She refuses to allow a proper inspection and has been hostile toward official HOA representatives." The tall man looked Maria up and down with suspicious eyes. "I am Officer Thompson with HOA Patrol," he said in an official-sounding voice. "This is my partner, Officer Davis. We received a call about suspicious activity at this address." Maria looked at the two new men and immediately knew they were fake too. Their uniforms were just regular clothes with patches sewn on. Their badges looked just as homemade as Harold's, and there was no such thing as HOA patrol that had officers with arrest powers. What kind of suspicious activity? Maria asked calmly. I have been working in my garden and talking to your friends here. There is nothing suspicious about that. Officer Davis, the shorter man with glasses, pulled out a notebook and started writing. We have received multiple reports about this address, he said seriously. Unusual visitors at odd hours, possible drug activity, residents concerned about safety in the neighborhood. Maria could not believe what she was hearing. Now they were claiming she was involved in drug activity. These men were escalating their false accusations to justify their increasingly aggressive behavior. That is completely false, Maria said firmly. I live alone and work regular hours. I do not have unusual visitors, and I certainly am not involved in any drug activity. Who made these reports? Thompson stepped closer to Maria. We cannot reveal our sources, he said. But we have enough evidence to conduct a full investigation of this property. We need to search your house, your garage, and your vehicle immediately. Johnson held up his handcuffs again. She has already refused to cooperate, he told the new arrivals. She will not let us inspect the property, and she has been argumentative and hostile. Davis wrote something else in his notebook. Failure to cooperate with official investigators is a serious violation, he said. It suggests that the resident has something to hide. Maria realized that these 5 men had clearly planned this whole thing together. They had coordinated their story and their fake official act. They probably did this to other people in the neighborhood who they did not want living there. I have nothing to hide, Maria said, but I also have constitutional rights that protect me from illegal searches. You have no legal authority to search my property without a warrant or probable cause. Thompson laughed. Constitutional rights? He said mockingly. This is not a criminal investigation. This is a neighborhood safety issue. HOA regulations override individual rights when community safety is at stake. Maria knew that was completely wrong. The Constitution always applied no matter what kind of investigation was happening. HOA rules could never override constitutional rights. These men clearly had no understanding of the law they were pretending to enforce. Williams was still recording everything with his phone. We are documenting the subject's continued refusal to cooperate with lawful orders from authorized officials, he said into the camera. Davis looked at his notebook and then at Maria. According to our records, this property has been flagged for multiple violations over the past 6 months, he said. Failure to maintain proper landscaping, unauthorized modifications to the structure, and complaints from neighbors about noise and activity. Maria stared at Davis in disbelief. She had lived in the house for 2 years and had never received any violation notices from the real HOA. Her landscaping was perfect. She had made no modifications to the house, and she was one of the quietest people in the neighborhood. Show me those records, Maria demanded. If there have been violations, I should have received official notices from the HOA board. I have never gotten any complaints or violation letters. Thompson shook his head. The records are confidential, he said, but the violations are serious enough to warrant immediate investigation and possible removal from the community. Harold stepped forward with his fake badge again. We have given you multiple chances to cooperate, he said. Now we are going to have to take official action. Johnson moved closer with the handcuffs while Thompson and Davis positioned themselves on either side of Maria. They were clearly planning to physically restrain her and force their way into her house. This is your last chance, Thompson said in a threatening voice. Either allow us to conduct our investigation voluntarily, or we will be forced to detain you and search the property under emergency authority. Maria looked around at the 5 men who now surrounded her on her own property. They were all pretending to be officials with arrest powers. They had fake badges, fake authority, and fake records of violations. But their handcuffs were real and their intentions were clearly dangerous. She realized that these men probably targeted people they thought would be easy to intimidate. They probably looked for single women, elderly people, or minorities who might not know their rights or might be afraid to fight back. But they had made a very big mistake when they chose Maria Rodriguez. She was not some helpless victim who would be scared by their act. She was a federal law enforcement officer with 15 years of experience dealing with criminals much more dangerous than these fake HOA bullies. Davis pulled out what looked like a police radio and spoke into it. This is Unit 12 requesting backup at 1247 Maple Street, he said. We have a non-compliant resident who may require physical detention. Maria listened to the radio call and knew it was fake, just like everything else. The radio was probably not even turned on, but the men were putting on a big show to make her think that real police were coming to help them. "I know you are not talking to anyone on that radio," Maria said calmly, "just like I know those badges are fake and those violation records do not exist. You are all impersonating law enforcement officers and attempting to commit kidnapping." Thompson laughed. "You watch too many cop shows," he said. "We are neighborhood safety officers with full authority to investigate violations and detain violators. When the police arrive, they will support our actions." Harold nodded and pointed at Maria. "She clearly does not understand how things work in this community," he said. "People who live here need to follow the rules and respect authority. If they cannot do that, they need to find somewhere else to live." Maria heard the racist message loud and clear. These men did not think she belonged in their neighborhood because of her race. They were using fake authority and intimidation tactics to try to drive her away. But Maria was not going anywhere. This was her home, and she had every right to live there peacefully. These men were the ones who did not belong, on her property or anywhere else where they could harass innocent people. Johnson stepped even closer with the handcuffs ready. "Time is up," he said. "You are under arrest for failure to comply with lawful orders and obstruction of an official investigation." Maria took a deep breath and made her decision. It was time to end this charade and show these fake officials who they were really dealing with. She reached into her pocket and felt for her wallet, where her real federal badge and credentials were waiting. Johnson was reaching for Maria's arm with the handcuffs when she finally decided she had seen enough. The 5 men had crossed every legal line possible. They had impersonated law enforcement officers, threatened to kidnap her, and tried to illegally search her property. It was time to end their dangerous game. "Stop right there," Maria said in a calm but commanding voice that made all 5 men freeze. There was something different in her tone now. It was the voice of someone who was used to being obeyed. Maria slowly reached into her back pocket and pulled out her leather wallet. She opened it and held it up so all 5 men could see what was inside. Her federal badge gleamed in the sunlight, and her official credentials were clearly visible. "I am National Sheriff Maria Rodriguez with the Multi-State Task Force Division," she said clearly. "You are all under investigation for impersonating federal officers, attempted kidnapping, harassment, and civil rights violations." The color drained from Harold's face so fast that Maria thought he might faint. His mouth fell open and he stared at the badge in disbelief. The fake badge he had been waving around suddenly felt very heavy in his hand. Johnson dropped the handcuffs and stumbled backward. That cannot be real," he stammered. "You're just a what?" Maria asked, raising her eyebrow. "Just a Hispanic woman who you assumed could not possibly be in law enforcement? Just someone you thought would be easy to intimidate and drive out of the neighborhood?" Thompson and Davis looked at each other with panic in their eyes. Their fake radio calls and phony investigations suddenly seemed much less clever. William stopped recording with his phone and tried to hide it behind his back. "There must be some mistake," Harold said weakly. "We are just trying to enforce neighborhood standards. We did not know you were. You did not mean to commit multiple federal crimes?" Maria asked. "You did not mean to violate my civil rights? You did not mean to attempt to kidnap a federal law enforcement officer on her own property?" Maria pulled out her phone and hit the speed dial for her office. The men watched in growing terror as she made a real phone call to real authorities. "This is Sheriff Rodriguez," she said into the phone. "I need immediate backup at my home address. I have 5 suspects who have been impersonating federal officers and attempting unlawful detention. Yes, I am safe, but I need units here now for arrests." When she hung up the phone, the 5 men were all staring at her with horror. The reality of their situation was finally sinking in. They had not been intimidating some helpless woman. They had been threatening a high-ranking federal law enforcement officer. "Please," Thompson said desperately, "we can explain everything. This was all a misunderstanding. We were just trying to keep the neighborhood safe." Maria looked at him with the cold stare she usually reserved for drug dealers and murderers. "Safe from what?" she asked. "Safe from people who look different from you? Safe from minorities who can afford to live in nice neighborhoods?" Davis tried to speak up. "We never said anything about race," he protested. "This was about HOA violations and suspicious activity." "What violations?" Maria demanded. "You could not point to a single real problem with my property. What suspicious activity?" You made up stories about drug dealers and unusual visitors that do not exist. Johnson was shaking now. We were just doing our job, he said weakly. The HOA asked us to investigate complaints. Maria shook her head. The real HOA never asked you to do anything, she said. I checked with them when I moved in. They have never received any complaints about my property. You made up this entire story to justify harassing someone you did not want in your neighborhood. Williams finally found his voice. How do we know that badge is real? He asked desperately. Anyone can buy a fake badge online. You could be impersonating an officer just like you say we are. Maria smiled for the first time since this whole thing started. Good question, she said. When my backup arrives, they will be very happy to verify my credentials. They will also be very interested in your fake badges and your claims about having arrest powers. The sound of sirens was getting closer now. Maria could see the panic spreading across the faces of all 5 men. They were realizing that their little intimidation game had turned into a serious federal case that could send them to prison. Listen, Harold said, his voice shaking. Maybe we can work something out. We are all neighbors here. We do not need to involve the police in this, Maria laughed. The police are already involved, she said. I am the police, and you just spent the last hour committing crimes in front of a federal law enforcement officer. Did you really think you could threaten to arrest me and then just walk away when you got caught? Thompson tried to run toward the fake HOA patrol vehicle, but Maria's commanding voice stopped him in his tracks. Do not move, she ordered. You are all staying right here until the real officers arrive to place you under arrest. The 5 men stood, frozen in Maria's front yard as 3 police. Cars and 2 unmarked federal vehicles pulled into her driveway. Real law enforcement officers got out of the cars and walked quickly toward the group. A tall sergeant from the local police department approached Maria with a smile. Sheriff Rodriguez, he said respectfully. We got your call. What do we have here? Maria pointed to the 5 men who were now huddled together looking terrified. These men have been impersonating federal officers, she explained. They threatened to arrest me, attempted to search my property without a warrant, and tried to detain me with handcuffs. The sergeant looked at Harold's fake badge and shook his head. These are pretty bad fakes, he said. Where did you get these? Harold could not speak. His mouth was moving, but no words were coming out. The reality of facing real police officers with real authority was too much for him to handle. 2 FBI agents approached the group. Maria knew them from previous cases they had worked together. Maria, one of them said, looks like you had an interesting morning. Very interesting, Maria replied. These gentlemen thought they could intimidate me into leaving the neighborhood. They had fake badges, fake authority, and a very real plan to violate my civil rights. The second FBI agent looked at the 5 men with disgust. Impersonating federal officers is a serious crime, he said. Add in the attempted kidnapping and civil rights violations, and you are looking at significant federal prison time. Johnson finally found his voice. We did not know she was a cop, he said desperately. We thought she was just some woman who did not belong in the neighborhood. The FBI agent raised his eyebrow. So you admit that you target women you think do not belong in your neighborhood? He asked. That sounds like a clear civil rights violation to me. Williams was crying now. We were just trying to protect property values, he sobbed. We did not mean for this to happen. Maria looked at all 5 men with no sympathy at all. You meant for exactly this to happen, she said. You wanted to scare someone into leaving their home because you did not think they belonged in your neighborhood. The only thing you did not expect was to get caught by someone who could fight back. The sergeant began reading the men their rights while other officers collected evidence. The fake badges, the handcuffs, the fake HOA patrol vehicle, and Williams's phone with the video recording would all be used as evidence in their federal trial. As the handcuffs clicked into place on Harold's wrists, he looked at Maria with defeated eyes. We really did not know, he said quietly. Maria looked back at him with no pity. That is exactly the problem, she said. You saw a Hispanic woman and assumed she could not possibly belong in your neighborhood. You never bothered to find out who I really was or what I do for a living. You just decided to try to drive me away. The 5 men were led to the police cars in real handcuffs, not the fake ones they had tried to use on Maria. As they were driven away, Maria finally felt like she could relax for the first time all morning. As the police cars drove away with Harold and his 4 friends in handcuffs, more law enforcement vehicles continued to arrive at Maria's house. Word had spread quickly through the police department that someone had tried to impersonate federal officers and threaten a national sheriff. Officers who knew Maria wanted to see for themselves what had happened. Detective Sarah Williams from the local police department walked up to Maria with a big smile. "Sheriff Rodriguez," she said, shaking her head in amazement. "Of all the houses in all the neighborhoods, these idiots had to pick yours." Maria laughed for the first time all day. "I keep telling people that criminals are not very smart," she said. "But this might be the dumbest thing I have ever seen." FBI agent Mark Chen, who had worked several cases with Maria, was examining the fake badges that Harold's group had left behind. "These are really terrible," he said, holding one up to the light. "A child could tell these are fake."
"How did they think they would fool anyone?"
"They have probably been fooling people," Maria replied. "I doubt I am the first person they tried this on. They were too organized and had their act too well rehearsed. They have been doing this to other people in the neighborhood." Agent Chen nodded seriously. "We will definitely investigate that," he said. "If they have been targeting other residents, especially minorities or people they thought could not fight back, this could be part of a larger pattern of civil rights violations." Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sheriff's department walked over with a clipboard. "Maria, we need to get your full statement about what happened," he said. "The district attorney wants to make sure we have everything documented properly for the federal charges." As Maria gave her statement to Lieutenant Rodriguez, she explained every detail of what had happened. She described how the men had approached her property without permission, shown fake badges, made false claims about violations, and threatened to arrest her with handcuffs. "They had it all planned out," Maria explained. "They knew exactly what to say and do to intimidate someone. They brought fake badges, handcuffs, a fake patrol vehicle, and even fake radio equipment. This was not something they just decided to do this morning." Detective Williams was taking pictures of everything. "The fake HOA patrol vehicle is particularly interesting," she said. "Someone spent time and money to make those decals and get them put on the car. They were serious about making this look official." Agent Chen was on his phone talking to his supervisor. When he hung up, he looked at Maria with a serious expression. "The FBI is going to take the lead on this case," he said. "Impersonating federal officers is always a federal crime. But when you add in the civil rights violations and possible conspiracy charges, this becomes a major investigation." Maria nodded. She had expected this would become a federal case. "What kind of sentences are we looking at?" she asked. "Impersonating a federal officer can carry up to 3 years in prison," Agent Chen explained. "Attempted kidnapping can be 10 to 20 years. Civil rights violations can add another 10 years. If we can prove they did this to other people, we could be looking at conspiracy charges that carry even longer sentences." Lieutenant Rodriguez finished taking Maria's statement and looked up from his clipboard. "The ironic thing is," he said, "if these men had just minded their own business, they would be having a normal Saturday morning right now instead of sitting in federal custody, facing decades in prison." Detective Williams laughed. "Instead, they decided to mess with one of the most respected law enforcement officers in the state," she said. "Maria, you have worked more high-profile federal cases than most FBI agents. These guys picked the wrong person to intimidate." Maria appreciated the support from her fellow officers, but she was also thinking about the bigger picture. "This is not really about me," she said. "The problem is that these men thought they could get away with this because they picked someone they saw as vulnerable. They probably have been getting away with it with other people." Agent Chen nodded in agreement. "That is exactly why we are going to investigate whether this is part of a pattern," he said. "If they have been targeting other minority residents or people they thought would not fight back, we need to identify those victims and build a comprehensive case." Detective Williams pulled out her phone and showed Maria a social media page. "We already found Harold Pemberton's Facebook page," she said. "He has been posting for months about protecting neighborhood values and keeping the wrong elements out. It is pretty clear what he meant by that." Maria looked at the Facebook posts and shook her head in disgust. Harold had been very careful not to use directly racist language, but his meaning was obvious. He talked about certain types of people who were bringing down the neighborhood and the need to take action to protect property values. "This gives us good evidence about his motivations," Agent Chen said. "When this goes to trial, the jury will be able to see that this was not just about HOA violations. This was about trying to drive minorities out of the neighborhood, Lieutenant Rodriguez closed his clipboard and looked around Maria's property. "You know what is funny?" he said. "Your house and yard look better than most of the other houses on this street. If Harold was really concerned about property values, he should have been thanking you for maintaining such a beautiful property." Maria smiled. "That is the thing about racism," she said. "It is not really about facts or logic. It is about fear and hatred." Harold saw a Hispanic woman living in what he considered his neighborhood, and that was all he needed to know. Detective Williams pointed down the street where some of Maria's neighbors were standing in their yards watching all the police activity. "I bet some of those neighbors know exactly what Harold and his friends have been up to," she said. "They probably heard him complaining about you and talking about taking action." Agent Chen made a note on his pad. "We will interview all the neighbors," he said. "If anyone knew about this plan or encouraged it, they could face conspiracy charges too. And if anyone else was targeted by this group, we need to find them and get their statements." As the investigation continued, Maria felt a sense of satisfaction that justice was being served. But she also felt sad that this kind of thing was still happening in her neighborhood and communities across the country. "The worst part," Maria told Detective Williams, "is that I moved here because I wanted a peaceful place to relax on weekends. I deal with enough criminals and violence at work. I just wanted to come home to a quiet neighborhood where I could work in my garden and not worry about anything." Detective Williams put her hand on Maria's shoulder. "You will have that peaceful neighborhood now," she said. "Once word gets around about what happened to Harold and his friends, I doubt anyone else will bother you. They all know now that you are not someone to mess with." Agent Chen was wrapping up his investigation of the scene. "Maria, we will need you to testify when this goes to trial," he said. "But given how clear-cut this case is, there is a good chance they will all plead guilty to avoid longer sentences." Maria nodded. "I will testify if needed," she said. "But you are right that they will probably plead guilty. They were caught red-handed by multiple law enforcement officers. Their lawyers will tell them they have no chance of winning at trial." As the last police car pulled away, Maria finally had her quiet neighborhood back. But now it was quiet for the right reasons, because the troublemakers had been removed, not because she had been driven away. 6 months after the incident at Maria's house, Harold Pemberton and his 4 accomplices stood before a federal judge for their sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed with law enforcement officers, neighborhood residents, and local reporters who had followed the case closely. The investigation had revealed that Harold's group had indeed targeted other residents in Willowbrook Heights and surrounding neighborhoods. 3 other families had come forward to report similar harassment. All of the victims were minorities who had recently moved into predominantly white neighborhoods. Maria sat in the front row of the courtroom as the judge read the sentences. Harold Pemberton, as the leader of the group, received 5 years in federal prison for impersonating a federal officer, attempted kidnapping, and civil rights violations. Johnson, Williams, Thompson, and Davis each received 3 to 4 years depending on their level of involvement. The court finds that these defendants engaged in a calculated campaign to intimidate and harass residents based solely on their race and ethnicity. The judge said sternly, "This kind of behavior has no place in our society and will be punished to the full extent of the law." After the sentencing, Maria was approached by reporters outside the courthouse. She had become something of a local celebrity, and her case had attracted national attention as an example of how to fight back against racist intimidation. "Sheriff Rodriguez," one reporter called out, "what message do you hope this case sends to other communities dealing with similar problems?" Maria thought carefully before answering. "I hope people understand that they have rights no matter who they are or where they come from," she said. "No one has the authority to harass you or try to drive you from your home because of your race or ethnicity. If someone tries to intimidate you with fake badges and false authority, call the real police immediately." Another reporter asked, "Do you think Harold Pemberton and his group would have tried this with someone who was not a minority?" Maria shook her head. "Absolutely not," she said. "They targeted me because they assumed I would be easy to intimidate. They thought a Hispanic woman could not possibly belong in their neighborhood and would not know how to fight back. They were wrong on both counts." The case had also led to major changes in the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. The entire board had resigned in shame after it was revealed that some members knew about Harold's activities, but had done nothing to stop them. A new board was elected with a strong commitment to diversity and inclusion. The new HOA president, Dr. Jennifer Park, had personally apologized to Maria and the other victims. She had also implemented new policies to prevent any unauthorized enforcement activities and had organized neighborhood events to bring residents together, regardless of their backgrounds. What happened to Sheriff Rodriguez and the other families was completely unacceptable. Dr. Park had told the local newspaper, "Our community is stronger when it welcomes people from all backgrounds. We are committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again." Maria had also received an unexpected honor from her own department. The National Sheriff's Association had given her an award for courage and community service. At the award ceremony, her supervisor praised her handling of the situation. Sheriff Rodriguez showed incredible professionalism and restraint in a situation where many people would have lost their temper, he said. She allowed these criminals to reveal the full extent of their crimes before taking action, which helped us build the strongest possible case against them. Maria's story had also become part of training programs for law enforcement agencies across the country. FBI agents and local police officers now studied the case as an example of how racist groups use intimidation tactics and how to recognize and respond to impersonation of law enforcement. At one training session, Maria explained to a room full of officers how the criminals had made their biggest mistake by escalating too quickly. They went from fake HOA inspectors to fake federal officers in less than an hour, she said. If they had been smarter and more patient, they might have been harder to catch. Fortunately for us, bullies are usually not very smart. The case had also attracted the attention of civil rights organizations, who used it as an example in their advocacy for stronger hate crime laws. Maria had spoken at several conferences about the importance of knowing your rights when confronted by people claiming to have authority. The key is to stay calm and ask questions, she always told audiences. Real law enforcement officers will have proper identification and will follow legal procedures. If someone cannot show you legitimate credentials or explain their legal authority, they probably do not have any. Back in her neighborhood, life had finally settled into the peaceful routine Maria had originally wanted. Her neighbors were friendlier now, and several had apologized for not speaking up sooner about Harold's behavior. Some admitted they had heard him making racist comments but had not wanted to get involved. Mrs. Chen from across the street had become a good friend. She often brought Maria homemade cookies and they would sit on Maria's back porch talking about gardening and neighborhood news. "I am so glad you did not let those terrible men drive you away," Mrs. Chen had told her. "You make our neighborhood better." Maria had also become something of a mentor to other minority families moving into predominantly white neighborhoods. She received calls and emails from people across the country who were facing similar harassment. She always gave them the same advice: know your rights, document everything, and do not be afraid to call the real police. 1 year after the incident, Maria was working in her garden on a quiet Saturday morning when she heard footsteps on her walkway. For a moment, her police instincts kicked in and she tensed up. But when she looked up, she saw a young Hispanic family with 2 small children. "Excuse me," the woman said nervously. "We are the Martinez family. We just moved in down the street. We heard about what happened to you last year, and we wanted to introduce ourselves." Maria smiled and invited them to sit on her porch. As they talked, she learned that Mr. Martinez was a doctor and Mrs. Martinez was a teacher. They had bought their house with money saved over many years of hard work, just like Maria had. "We were a little worried about moving here," Mrs. Martinez admitted. "But after hearing how you handled those men, we felt more confident that we could belong in this neighborhood too." Maria looked at their 2 young children playing in her yard and felt hopeful about the future. "You absolutely belong here," she said. "This is your home now, and anyone who has a problem with that will have to deal with me." As the Martinez family walked back to their house, Maria returned to her garden. The roses were blooming even more beautifully than they had the year before. She had learned that sometimes you have to fight to protect the peaceful life you want, but it is always worth the effort. Harold Pemberton and his friends had thought they could intimidate her into leaving her home. Instead, they had ended up in federal prison while Maria was still enjoying her garden on quiet Saturday mornings. Justice had been served, and her neighborhood was now truly the peaceful place she had always wanted it to be.